reviewed a set of Rose Techniques fairly recently and I really did like them. This set of IEMs, however, it doesn't really suit my music taste, but I can see a lot of people really appreciating this. Thank you to the folk at Rose Techniques for providing me with this demo unit to make this review possible. All thoughts and opinions are my own. So let's jump straight into how this is built. These have a premium unboxing experience, which seems to be their approach to all their IEMs. You get a neatly printed sketch of the IEMs. The IEMs, a very smart looking case with 3 sets of ear tips in it, as well as a dongle DAC with a CX31993 chip in it. You get the cable for the IEMs and you also get 4 extra ear tips with larger bores as well. The IEMs have a metal faceplate with the Lightyear series of branding on it, and the housing has a glossy finish which is contoured quite neatly, which does seem to fit my ears quite well. The nozzle is a gold plated one with a fine meshing, and they come with the MMCX connectors to attach to the cable. The cable is terminated to MMCX connectors where the IEMs connect to, and the other end of the cable is terminated to a 3.5mm headphone jack. If you're not a fan of the MMCX connector, you do have the option of selecting a 0.78 2-pin connector from the Rose Techniques website when you're buying from them. It's a dual strand monocrystalline copper cable and is fabric wrapped, so it's nice to the touch. The overall comfort from these is quite good. They seem to have done something with these IEMs when it comes to dealing with ear pressure. Some IEMs feel uncomfortable when inserted into the ear, but these seem to avoid that somehow. You don't get a microphone on this cable, so your phone's microphone should take over for any calls or during gameplay. These come with 10mm dynamic drivers as well as 2 balanced armature drivers in each IEM. They have a frequency response of 10 Hz all the way up to 25,000 Hz, and they have a very easy to drive low resistance of just 24 ohms. On a volume front, I found myself listening to this at about 30% volume, which is very comfortable for me. When I go up to 35%, it does open up a bit more in the bass, but I found when you go to about 40%, it does get a little too loud for me. So if you do intend on preserving your hearing, I wouldn't recommend listening to about 40% or more over prolonged periods of time. Now, every piece of audio equipment usually does lose its roundedness at lower volumes. So does this, but I found even at as low as 20% volume in a very quiet setting, it does maintain a good amount of roundedness. When it comes to its soundstage, it does exist within a bubble in your head, and it exists on a horizontal plane. You do have good left and right separation with a well-centered phantom channel, and you do get the illusion of some tones coming a little further out of the IEMs at times. This does happen rarely, but if you do want to experience a little more expansion with the stage with these IEMs, they do provide those wider board tips, and I found that it does give a sense of a slightly larger bubble when you are listening to your music. On an imaging front, this does perform very well. In fact, the separation between everything in the percussive range is very easy to sort of tell apart. So if you do want to appreciate nuances in your music, it's very easy to do. For that matter, even in the mid-range between vocals and instruments, the separation is quite distinguishable, and I think every IEM honestly in this price range is pretty good when it comes to its overall detail recovery, and this is another set of IEMs that can be added to that list. High frequencies do have an elevation over here, but it does remain soft enough to not offend. There's a good amount of detail and separation in this range, especially with strings, wind and percussive instruments. I did think this range would have been a little too aggressive, but the BA drivers handling this range do have a smoothness and roundedness to their delivery. It does come close to being bright, but doesn't quite get there. I do wish this range was a little less enthusiastic, but you can always control this range a little with a different dongle DAC, amp, or with EQ tweaks. Listening to a recent favorite of mine, I Will Wait For You, performed by the Danish National Symphony Orchestra. There's a lot going on in this range with violins, flutes, and percussive instruments, which can get overwhelming for some budget IEMs due to the dynamics of this track. But these IEMs handle this range's detail and separation with a good amount of ease. It does get close to getting on the brighter side of things, but never really crosses that threshold. Mids have a recess in the lower mids and an elevation in the higher mids. This can tend to make some recordings sound a little sibilant. Because of this tuning, some vocals don't come across as being the most rounded in presentation. This applies more towards male vocals than female vocals. There's a good amount of vocal and instrument separation in this range, so if you're listening to anything that has a lot going on in this region, it's very easy to focus in on all elements of your music here. I do wish the lower mids were a little less recessed, so they'd give male vocals a little more importance. Listening to Dennis Van Arsen perform She, the piano in this range comes through with a good amount of energy, so much so you're able to feel the emotion Jeff Franzel puts into every note he strikes. But Dennis's voice, I feel, could have a little more depth here, which would certainly bring a lot more emotion to his performance with this beautiful track. Lower frequencies have quite an elevation compared to those recessed mids, and thanks to this tuning, it does give the bass quite a lot more prominence than I thought it would. This range does let the dynamic driver take over with a good amount of purpose. The energy in this range does change up a bit when you swap between the wider and tighter board tips, with the tighter bores making this range a lot more prominent. It does get a little bit tighter and better structured with these tips, but it will cost you with slightly reduced staging. Don't expect a bloated bass response from these. These are more controlled than TWS earphones for certain, and having that lower mid recess does help in further accentuating this range when listening to music. Listening to Justin Timberlake perform Say Something featuring Chris Stapleton, the lower frequencies that are produced in this track usually aren't carried over much with most IEMs, so I was actually quite surprised I could hear them with these. Having the IEMs further in your ear canal will diminish the lows, but if they sit slightly further out in the canal while maintaining a seal, this range does have a good kick to it for a set of IEMs. So to sum up, overall on a build front, I really like how this is put together. That little metal plate they've got with the Lightyear kind of brand etched into it is very neatly done. Even the housing, the way it's kind of molded to sit within the ear is very neatly done. I think this might come very close to kind of having a custom IEM made, but not really, because this is of course mass produced, but it does have interesting contours that do fit in quite comfortably. And also when it comes to the IEM having that MMCX connector, I do like it because I've noticed IEMs that have the 2-pin connector, if you put into your ear and there's a bit of torque on the cable, that tension is kind of pulling against the IEM or at the cable, so it'll either pull on the outside of your ear or try and pull the IEM out slightly. But with this MMCX, it kind of just, it has this 360 rotation. So because of that, it kind of adjusts and there's no tension. It's a lot more comfortable. And of course, that cable, I think I like that it's fabric wrapped and it does feel quite nice. On a sound front, I really like how this sounds more with acoustic music than anything vocal. Anything acoustic, be it, just instruments, guitars, violins, orchestral, that kind of stuff, it's perfectly fine. But the minute you say operatic, once there's a voice, or if you say rock or just anything vocals really, the P's, S's, anything that can hit that sibilant sort of frequency range can sort of, it gets a little uncomfortable for me. So if you are kind of sensitive to that frequency, this might not be for you. But when it comes to the bass, these are a separate entity altogether. I think because they've catered a lot more of the lower frequencies, obviously, to the dynamic driver, the BA drivers handling everything else. The lower frequencies come through with a lot of confidence for a set of IEMs, which of course is a very nice welcome. So I've tested these with the provided dongle DAC that was in the box, and it is a nice sounding DAC. It does have a nice amount of air, but I'd say it's a very flat sounding DAC in the sense it doesn't have very much color to it. So if you are into a more neutral listening experience, this DAC is going to work perfectly fine, and it's very nice that it's included in the box. In fact, of all the IEMs that I've tested, this is the first one that I've seen that's come with a dongle DAC in the box. Now, I don't think it has a separate dedicated amp chip. It's just a DAC chip. So I did also pair this with the iFi Go Link that I use for testing a lot of IEMs. And I personally do like the iFi Go Link, the way it's tuned. It does have a bit of coloration, no doubt, but I really do prefer the way it handles itself with the iFi Go Link. But the one thing that the iFi cannot do is also eliminate that sibilant range, because these earphones just have that accentuation over there. So I mean, if you do have a dongle DAC that does have a suppression there in that range, or even if you do play around with EQ settings, I think these are a very nice set to listen to, because everything from the imaging to the staging, especially with those wider tips, does make this a very enjoyable set of IEMs to wear. But the only thing I'll say is be aware of is the sibilance from it. If you are open to correcting it with an EQ, these are a very nice set to have. And if you're someone who doesn't want to play around with EQs, if you listen to genres like jazz, blues, orchestral, anything acoustic really, I think these are a very nice set to listen to. They're very nice to listen to with this kind of music, because the nuances you can pull out of every sort of frequency range is absolutely, I mean, it's terrific for a set of IEMs that cost as much as these do. So anyway, moving to the cost of these, well, at the time of recording this video, these do have a maximum retail price over here of about 7,999 rupees, but these do have a selling price right now of 6,999, of course, at the time of recording this video, on Concept Cart. And if you do want to buy this from the Rose Technics website, it does go for $75.99. So I will leave the links down below if you do want to make these yours. And one thing to remember is, if you do want the 2-pin 0.78 connector, I think you can buy that via the Rose Techniques website, but I'm not too sure about Concept Cart, but that's one thing to keep in mind. And is it value for money? Well, You know, honestly, all IEMs that are sitting within the sub 10,000 price bracket are, I think they're overachievers when it comes to detail and overall just the naturality of sound that they bring out. Now, no doubt each one is catered to different genres, which is why I feel this is catered to specific genres, and if you do appreciate those genres, I'd say that this is definitely good value for money. So I hope you found this video helpful and informative, and I do hope that I've helped you make some sort of purchase decision. If you would like to help support the channel, I'm sure you know exactly how to. But of course, thank you for tuning into Paul's POV for some sound advice.